Well, hello, and welcome to our third Zoom session for 250 real ear measurement. Yeah, there is something odd about the link for this particular class. It seems that somehow you guys have the link for what I have as Acoustics 110. And I don't know why that is, because I'll just kind of mention it to you because it happened over the past 2 weeks. So I've logged into Zoom using the link that I've done for 110 Acoustics, because for the past 2 weeks, that's where I have found you when we've watched it live together. And the link that I have for Acoustics is https://otc.zoom.us/j/ and then the numbers are 9869-99924. But really, the link should be for 250 fitting methods. https://otc.zoom.us/j/4952399980. That's really what it ought to do. So I have no idea. At any rate, I have no attendees, it appears, so I'll just be talking. But last week we covered ANSI, and I believe the week before we even looked a little bit at non-electronic acoustic modifications. So non-electronic acoustic modifications was covered in as the last unit actually in your Acoustics 110 last year. Okay, and then ANSI measures have also been covered in another course, I understand. Anyway, we reviewed them last week because review is good. And as I always say, when you watch a movie a second time, you tend to get more out of it anyway. And what I'm doing this week and next week is kind of review as well on fitting methods. Fitting methods from your 150 course that you might have had this past summer. I guess, 150, fitting methods. And I think in order to understand real ear, you need to really have a healthy appreciation for fitting methods, because the development of fitting methods and the development of real ear are completely intertwined, totally. The evolution of one affected the other. So before we get into real ear as it evolved, let's talk about fitting methods as they evolved and really have a good handle on the prescriptive fitting methods as they evolved from yesterday until today, big time, okay? So basically, fitting methods, where did they come from? Why do they exist? How are hearing aids prescribed? Who did this? What's it based on? So let's look, I'll share screen, and we'll look at some notes on early fitting methods as they evolved. So fitting methods. Now think about this carefully. Why do we have so many fitting methods in the first place? How come we got so many of the darn things in the first place? How come with glasses, the fitting is either correct or incorrect? Whereas with hearing aids, it's not. Now look at this. Think about this. If I'm wearing, if these are just reading glasses, so anybody can read these, but if they were prescriptive lenses, only I could wear them. You couldn't wear them. You'd get a headache. Okay, think about it. I can't wear your glasses. You can't wear mine. Everybody knows that hearing aids, that eyeglasses take a prescription. You go to the optometrist, you get an eye test. Sometimes one eye is different than the other. One lens will be different from the other. La-di-da, right? Everybody knows that. Hearing aids, it's different. You have a plurality of fitting methods. You have the letter S after fitting methods. Okay, it's not the fitting method. With eyes, it's the fitting method. It's either correct or incorrect. If it's incorrect, you're going to get a headache. So it's ta-chung, ta-chung. How does this look? Oh, it's blurry. It's better. Oh, that's good. No, it's getting blurry again. Back to this one. Good. Okay, healed. Next eye. Next eye. Okay, so it's right or wrong. That's because you're fitting a conductive vision loss. The retina is all right, Jack. It's just that light can't get to the retina. So you wear your glasses to focus the light correctly on an intact retina. And the retina, the back of your eye, changes light into electricity. Just like the hair cells of the cochlea change traveling waves into electricity. Same thing. Only with hearing loss, it's the retina itself that's damaged, the hair cells. Therefore, fitting methods aren't as exact. Fitting methods are more of like a philosophy. What does this group think? What does this group think? What do Catholics think? What do Protestants think? What do Buddhists think? Like, what is their faith? What is their religion? What is their belief? Because the matching of hearing aids to hearing loss is different. Okay? And it's because you are addressing the broken retina, in quotes, of the ear itself. And so the approaches are more of a matter of the researchers' biases, where they come from, how they were taught, what they think is important. And so the fitting methods, great, we got a joiner. Great. And did you join on to the Zoom session that Roger's joined as well? Did you have any trouble joining on today or not?
I did. In fact, I had to get with Roger, and he told me there's no address for you anywhere on the site. So I found you by going through my history on my computer.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
So now, I gave that information to Raj. He's got it now. I'll have it now, but it does need to be put on the website somewhere.
Yeah.
You sent us an announcement that gave the address, and
Yeah.
then whenever you sent us the other email stating that we were going to push it back from 3:30 to 5 last week, well, it took that previous email away. So that's why I couldn't find it.
Maybe what I should do is email, and I'll email after class today. I'll email a new link, because the Zoom sessions that I'm always tuning into are 110 acoustics.
Okay.
That's where I found you last week, and that's where I found you the week before. Because somehow I must have sent, I don't know how, but I must have sent the wrong link to you guys. So when I tried to go under 250, I couldn't find you. And then I would look under my list of Zoom sessions, and I'd see a green light beside 110. And I'd be going, okay, looks like they're already in session there. So I'd click on that, and there you'd be. So what I think I'll do after class today is I will email the link for 250, the one that I have as 250. And I'll even read it to you here. This is the one I'm going to send.
Okay.
Here goes.
Okay.
Once you get a pencil in your hand.
Yeah.
Harumph. HTTPS : / and Roger, I'll read this to you again too. It'll be the link from now on that we should try and use for 250, okay? It's HTTPS : / you know, the two lines, OTC .zoom, ZOOM .US / J / and then here's the numbers, 4952 39980.
Okay, are you sure those are backward slashes? They're not forward slashes?
Well, I don't know. Here, I'll show you here. Let's see. There you go. It's that bottom one.
Okay, those are forward slashes.
Okay. Yeah, the way they usually are with Zoom. I don't know, just
okay.
Yeah, the top is leaning to the right and the bottom is leaning to the left. Yeah.
Yes, perfect. Perfect. No problemo. And you got, if you will, 495239980.
Correct. Yep.
Awesome.
And remember the letter J before that.
Yeah. In
Okay.
the forward
Otherwise,
slash.
it's all the same. https://otc.zoom.us/J/ and then the numbers. But I will type an email and send that out to everyone as well. So that
Okay.
hopefully from now on, you can log right into the 250 Zoom session that you should see there. And we won't have this trouble. No worries. It's all good. It's cool. We cool, Jack. All right. Now, we haven't covered a lot, but just a little bit before you joined us. Okay? And all I was doing was contrasting the eye to the ear like we've done 1,000 frickin' times. Okay? Saying that vision loss is conductive, and that when you're wearing glasses, you're refocusing light upon an intact retina. So Angela can't wear my glasses, I can't wear hers, or we're going to get headaches. Okay? Because most vision loss is conductive. Light isn't properly reaching the back of the eye, called the retina, and the retina, as you remember, changes light into electricity. So fitting of eyes is either done right or wrong. It's black or white. And we do the old imitation. How does this look? Blurry. Oh, that's better. Oh, that's clear. Oh, they're getting blurry again. Back to this one. Yep, that's good. Healed. Next eye. Okay? It's black or white. But with hearing loss, sensory neural, someone has scratched the retina. Now the hair cells themselves are damaged. And when that happens, fitting methods become more of a method of philosophy or religion. Are you Buddhist? Are you Catholic? Are you Protestant? What's your belief? What's your faith? What's your approach? Why? Because it's the retina, in quotes, of the ear itself that's damaged. And there isn't a complete right or wrong thing. It's because hearing loss is sensory neural. Now think about that in vision like macular degeneration. Okay? Degeneration of the retina. If glasses were in our situation, they would be trying to help you see different colors. They'd be trying to separate red from green from yellow. I mean, imagine that challenge. Okay? Then the optician is in our shoes. So we deal with something different, and that's why fitting methods end in the letter S. Fitting methods, plural. Whereas with vision, it's the fitting method, singular. It's either right or wrong. So with that in mind, now we share screen and look at our notes together. Here's how it begins. So this is a review from 150. We covered ANSI testing in unit last week. You looked at non-electronic acoustic modifications the week before, and you're looking at fitting methods today and next week at least. For the next couple of weeks, we're looking at fitting methods because I want to make sure that we are grounded well in our fitting methods. Now, I'll stop sharing and ask you guys to tell me, when did you take 150 fitting methods? Was that in the summer? Yeah, I wonder when you took 150, because that's the course called...
Been about a year and a half for me, Dr.
What was that, Raj?
Been about a year and a half.
Yeah. So when you're looking at real ear, which is what this course is, 250, I said at the beginning too, before you two tuned on, fitting methods and real ear are like two carrots in the garden that grew around each other. Okay, they are, the evolution of one affected the evolution of the other. And even in my book, chapters 4, 5, and 6. Chapter 4 is early fitting methods. Chapter 5 is real ear. And chapter 6 is today's fitting methods. So it shows you, just by the progression of those chapters, that the development of the two is intertwined together. Okay? And that's why in a course called Real Ear, if you hadn't had fitting methods in over a year, it behooves of us to look at them again and be refreshed as to exactly how they evolved, why, where, and how. And that's what we're going to do today. So when we look at our notes now, and read from the top here, so why do we have so many of them in the first place? The retina of the ear itself is damaged, If optometry clients had retinal damage, optometry and audiology would be more similar. Vision loss is conductive. The eyeball is simply too short or too long. With hearing aids, put a star by this. There's two main goals in fitting hearing aids. Number one, providing the proper gain and output for the loss of hearing. That's number one. Obviously, that's kind of like duh. And number two, because the loss is to the retina, in quotes, of the ear itself, we've got to increase the signal to noise ratio. We've got to make the noise, the signal, speech, louder than the noise. Now, fitting methods do not involve goal number two. Fitting methods do not involve signal to noise ratio. Fitting methods only involve goal number one, gain and output. Okay, they'll dictate how much compression you use. Remember last semester in 240? Compression is a gain issue. Okay, directional mics and digital noise reduction is a signal to noise ratio issue. So those two issues with hearing aids, because the cochlea is broken, like Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall, and you can't put it back together again, because of that, fitting methods will address gain. Other things have to address signal to noise ratio. Again, directional mics, digital noise reduction, but let's look at how much gain to provide for a hearing loss. Now, when you got hearing loss, what happens to your dynamic range? It got smaller. So if the floor went up and the ceiling of loudness tolerance didn't, something has to accommodate that. That shrinking dynamic range. And what addressed that was the half gain rule. The half gain rule. Let's look at the half gain rule in a PowerPoint slide. It's more fun. Here we are. The half gain rule. And look at this, fitting methods and real ear measures. This is the first PowerPoint slide from our topic today. And it evolved. Fitting methods evolved, and so did real ear. You've got this one on the left called functional gain. This one in the middle called insertion gain. And the one on the right called in situ output. This is the development of hearing aid verification. In other words, how do you prove that the method is doing what it said it's doing? So let's say you've got someone's hearing loss, X, say it's a flat 50 dB loss, and you set the hearing aid according to the fitting method so to accommodate that 50 dB loss. How are you going to prove that you got what you set out to do? You do that with doing real ear. So fitting methods predict what you want, and real ear says, is there any truth in that, senor? Is that true? Verily I say unto thee. What's the truth? Okay, verity means the truth. So fitting methods predict, and hearing aid software predicts using fitting methods, predicts, and real ear proves it. So when you look at this very first slide in this presentation, this PowerPoint presentation, you'll see three squares. And on the left is called functional gain. And the middle one's called insertion gain, and the right one's called in situ output. These are the three ways that hearing aid fittings were verified, that you proved, are you getting what you said you'd get? So let's look at the next slide here. Here's a picture of your fitting the eye versus fitting the ear. And you can see the intact retina on the left. And then you can see the damaged hair cells on the right. So when you're looking at that, the yellow, I've kept the yellow the same color to show you that the retina of the eye is intact. It's just that light isn't properly getting to it. So fitting methods for the eye are very direct. But for the ear itself, I kept this the same color. These are the hair cells themselves are damaged. And so that's why I say hair cells of the cochlea are like the retina, in quotes, of the ear. So, vision loss equals conductive hearing loss. Vision loss does not equal sensory neural loss. And read what it says on this slide. The challenge is simple in vision. Mechanically overcome the transmission problem. Well, that would be the case if all hearing loss was conductive too. Because if all hearing loss was conductive, you'd have the fitting method singular. Think about it. I'll stop sharing here to prove it. If I have a block of crap in my ear preventing sound from getting to my inner ear, what's going to happen to my dynamic range? Nothing. It'll stay the same. Look at here. The floor will go up and the ceiling will go up together. I can't hear till now it's 50, but I'll be able to tolerate 150. My dynamic range will still be 100. Let's say I can't hear till 50 dB, but I'll be able to tolerate 150 because I got a plug in my ear. And the plug in my ear is pus or earwax. So if all loss was conductive, you'd have the fitting method. It would be right or wrong. Hearing loss is different. Sensory neural does this. So you've reduced your dynamic range. My floor went up, but my ceiling of loudness tolerance didn't. 100 dB still hurts, and yet I can't hear till 50. That is why you have a plurality of fitting methods. Let's keep examining. Go back to our good old PowerPoint here, and looky. So you got this situation here. So perfect hearing may look like this. Impaired hearing may look like that, and that's why you have a plurality of fitting methods. Here it is. The loudness growth graph. Make sure that we can really interpret and appreciate and understand this graph. You've got the numbers from 0 to 100 dB on the bottom, and you have your perceptions of those decibel values here. Normal loudness growth is the red line. So 10 to 20 is heard as very soft, 50 to 60 is heard as comfortable, and 90 to 100 is heard as too loud. The red diagonal line represents normal growth of loudness. Now, cause of 50 dB hearing loss. Now 50 to 60 sounds very soft, and yet 100 sounds too loud. So look what happened. 100 dB is heard equally loud by both populations, normal hearing and hearing loss. Yet, look at the bottom. So hearing aids have to amplify soft sounds by a lot and loud sounds by little or nothing at all. And they do that by means of compression, which you learned last semester. Look at it here too. A sensory neural loss sloping down. And you can look at this graph as showing you even in terms of dBSPL, because this bottom curve is minimal audible pressure. And this bottom curve is actually 0 dBHL. Only it's plotted in SPL here. But once again, whether plotted in HL or SPL, the floor went up, but the ceiling of loudness tolerance didn't. So the dynamic range is half. The floor went up, but the ceiling did not. Once again here, a normal dynamic range, the person can hear soft, average, loud, and now look at the dynamic range with sensory neural loss. The floor went up, but the ceiling did not. And it's all about that. And again in this picture, a normal dynamic range from 0 to 100, and a reduced dynamic range from, say, 50 to 100. So this slide, this slide, this slide, and this slide are all pointing at the same thing: reduced dynamic range. So look at what we need to do with fitting methods. And here's how people did it. Here you've got some hearing. Let's say the guy's hearing loss is 50. Look at the blue X's. He's got a 50 dB loss. Okay? He's got a 50 dB loss, and now a 5 dB sound comes in. Can he hear that? No. So what does the hearing aid have to do? Amplify the 5 dB sound by the full degree of the loss. So now it's 55. Now the guy can hear it. Okay? But let's say a sound came in like this yellow line. So it's audible to the guy with the 50 dB loss. How much should that be amplified? By less. And now let's say if this red line became audible to the client, how much would I amplify this? By even less. So the green, the yellow, and the red arrow are showing you the very same thing as these three arrows here. Soft sounds by a lot, average inputs by less, loud inputs by little or nothing at all. So these three arrows here are showing you the very same concept as these three arrows here are showing. Why? Because 100 dB is heard just as loud by sensory neural loss as by normal hearing. So here, this follows the notes very carefully. Do you mirror the audiogram with full-on gain? Well, look at this hearing loss now here in red. The hearing loss in red. And now look at this 5 dB sound across the frequencies. How much would I amplify this 5 decibel sound across the frequencies? By the full degree of the loss. Because if I do so, the white dotted line is going to be put here. I've amplified it by the full degree of the loss. Yup, I can do that, no problem. Let's look at it on the right so that the decibels go up. Same thing. Here's the guy's hearing plotted upward. Here's that 5 dB sound across the frequencies. If I want to make this 5 dB bottom dotted line audible, I've got to lift it by the full degree of the loss. Then it's audible. That's all fine and dandy. But what happens if the input sound, oh wow, do I have a bright light shining on the side of me? I look like I'm kind of in heaven or something. There's this kind of, oh, weird. It's just the angle of the sun. Don't worry about it. Oh, is that ever strange? Hang on a second. You know what it reminds me of? I'll show you a picture anyway. I'm going to close this so it's a little better. But it kind of reminds me of a picture that OTC people sent to me. And it's a picture of my daughter kind of bathed in light too. This is my daughter who is 23. She passed away in 2017. But OTC had a picture made of me, my better half, and the daughter there. I thought it was pretty neat. But just that picture reminded me of that. Just anyway, so now where were we? Okay, hang on here. Let me share here. I kind of got lost in that one, but no worries. Okay, here. So we can amplify a soft 5 dB sound by the full degree of the loss, no problem. That's easy peasy Japanesey. But what happens if the input is speech? How now, brown cow? How much do you amplify speech by? Because if the input is 5, sure, I can amplify a 5 dB input by the full degree of the loss, no problem. But if the input is 50 or 60, I can't amplify by the full degree of the loss because you're going to be blasting the person to kingdom come. Always remember, input plus gain is output. So I cannot give full gain, I can't take the hearing loss and amplify the input by the full degree of the loss. Because if I do so, my output is going to exceed the listener's UCLs. It will exceed the listener's loudness tolerance. And what is most input? Speech. Average conversational speech. And what is that in dBHL? 50 to 60 in HL. In SPL, 60 to 70. So if that's my average input, my typical input, I can only amplify by about 1/2 the degree of the loss. And that's where the half gain rule came in. It was a man named Sam Lybarger, Lybarger, Sam Lybarger, who came up with the half gain rule. And let's look at it for a second. Let's look at a picture of it. So, what did they do? Let's just take a look here. Here you go. Let's look at this picture. Here's a hearing loss sloping down. 25 in the lows, 60 in the highs. Typical presbycusis. See that? Now look at the letter A's. The letter A's going across the top there represent aided thresholds. Aided. So what they did was they first measured the guy under headphones and got his thresholds. Then they took the headphones off and they put a hearing aid in his ear. And yes, a hearing aid, because they didn't believe in binaural fittings in those days. Ear, nose, throat doctors thought hearing aid dealers were ripping people off. So you fit monoraily. Are you right-handed or left-handed? Well, that's the ear you fit. Okay? So you look like Colonel Klink off of Hogan's Heroes. You've got a monocle. Okay? So that's what they did. And then they would turn the hearing aid up to a comfortable volume, and they would retest his thresholds in a sound field with sound coming out of the speaker, and the sound would usually be warble tones. Instead of being beep, it would be beep. And they used warble tones so that you would get no reverberation in the room, in the sound room. So you're sitting here in the booth, first under headphones, pushing a button when you hear the tone. Good, take the headphones off, they put the hearing aid in the ear, turn the volume halfway up, and retest his thresholds in a sound field. And that's what the A's mean, aided. So here you go, aided thresholds. Notice how they aren't at the top. Notice how the aided thresholds are halfway up. Very important to notice that. That was your target. That was your goal. That's what you wanted to hit with the half gain rule. You wanted to aid the thresholds so that the thresholds were improved by half. And the reason you did that was because if you've increased the thresholds by half, then an input like average speech would be placed right here. See that? If I amplify, what's the input speech? Around 50 to 60 dBHL. So if I improve 50 to 60 dBHL, and if I add 15, 25, 30 to that, I'll be sitting right here. And look at that, aided speech is now sitting right in the middle of that guy's dynamic range, halfway between his floor and his loudness discomfort level. There it sits. So aided speech output will sit nicely in the middle of his dynamic range if and only if I amplify input speech by half the degree of the loss. Look at the thresholds. If I amplified speech by 30 here, 40 here, 60 here, 60 here, 60 here, then you're going to add 60 to an input of 55, and you're going to end up with about 115 or whatever. You know, you're way over. You're way down here. So that was the half gain rule. And people couldn't see this. They didn't have real ear. They could do this, but they did this in the hope and in the faith and in the belief that if they did this, this would happen. Now that little A keeps jumping around here on the, but pay that no mind, okay? But anyway, if they did this, then this would happen. Very good. So let's get out of here now and look at our notes. Where are we? Fitting methods only address number one, gain and output, of these two goals here. Specifically, we attempt to watch the maximum power output so you don't exceed the listener's uncomfortable loudness level. You try to give enough gain for the listener to comfortably hear conversational speech. And thirdly, you provide the right shape of frequency response for the person's loss. So those three goals of fitting methods, I mean, you're only addressing gain and output, but you're looking to make sure you're not doing too much. Give enough gain so the guy can hear conversational speech. And of course, look at the shape of the hearing loss. If it's a downward sloping loss, obviously give more treble input. If it's a flat loss, provide equal amplification across. And if it's a reverse rising loss, of course, give more bass than high frequency. So mirror the audiogram with full-on gain? Can't, especially not with old linear hearing aids. Remember, old linear hearing aids gave the same gain for all inputs. And not with a reduced dynamic range, because the ceiling may be similar to normal, but the floor is not. If you gave all the hearing loss back with, for example, a 50 dB linear hearing aid, the output for soft inputs like 5 dB would be okay, but the output for speech-like inputs would exceed uncomfortable loudness. It's just what I was talking about while showing you the slides. We were looking at it here in writing. So Sam Liebarger, trial and error on lots of people with sensory neural loss. He thought like I would have thought, and I'll imitate this. Well, you got a flat 60 dB loss. I guess I should amplify you by 60 dB. And that was the thought. I mean, that would be my intuition. I want to make your thresholds normal. So if I want to make 60 dB HL thresholds to 0 dB HL thresholds, I'm going to amplify by 60 dB. Make sense? Sure. Okay. So he'd do that or recommend that. And then the person would put on the hearing aids, giving 60 dB of gain. And what would happen is, now I'm going to talk to you, you tell me how the hearing aid sounds. And the guy, whoa, he'd be turning down the hearing aid. And where would he turn it down? Halfway. That's why they called it half gain. I'll say it again. A guy has a 50 dB loss. My intuition would say, give him 50 dB of gain. Why? Because I want to make the 50 dB threshold back to 0. That would be my intuition. My love, my heart on my sleeve. So I amplify by 50. I've improved the guy's thresholds until they're now 0. And then I start to talk to the guy. So now tell me, how do you think the hearing aids sound? The guy's going to freak because my input is now 50 to 60 dB HL. And I'm amplifying by 50 to 60 dB. Input plus gain is output. So the guy would turn the volume down to about halfway. And they look at that and go, people seem to only want half gain. No kidding, Sherlock, because the ceiling of loudness tolerance didn't change. The floor went up. Half gain rule. The half gain rule is the spinal cord of all fitting methods. It's the one that everything has in common. The only thing that all fitting methods have in common is roughly half gain for average speech inputs. Today's fitting methods address compression. And what did we say last year about compression? Compression gives different gain for different inputs. Linear gives the same gain for all inputs. So if I'm giving linear gain of 50 to speech, I'm giving linear gain of 50 to a whisper. I'm giving linear gain of 50 to a yell. Okay? Compression does differently. I might be giving 50 dB of gain to average speech, and I'm giving 70 dB of gain for soft speech. And if I start to talk really loud, I'm giving 20 dB of gain. Compression changes the amount of gain depending on the input. So today's fitting methods, they have 3 targets. One target for, here, I'll do this one. One target for average inputs, another target for soft inputs, and a third target for loud inputs. So today's fitting methods have 3 targets. But old fitting methods had 1 for any particular loss. So it doesn't mean they all had the same target. It means that for X hearing loss, you had a target. For Y hearing loss, you had a target. For Z hearing loss, you had a target, because linear hearing aids gave the same gain at all inputs. Angela.
Okay, so is it common, or I guess I should say, when you are raising, let me get this right, your soft inputs should be raised up at least by half?
Yeah, by more than half.
By
more than half. Average inputs should be raised up by half. Loud input should be raised up by less than half.
Okay.
Yep, fair enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea is a 5 dB input, sure, go ahead and amplify that by the full degree of the loss. Go for it. Because 60 plus 5 is 65. Easy peasy, Japanesey, I can tolerate that. But I can't take 60 dB loss and amplify by, input of speech by 60, because you'll blast the person out of the saddle. As they used to say on Star Trek, the dilithium crystals are giving them all they've got. Captain, you kind of got any more, okay? So it's really important to get an idea, and that's what I'm doing today, is we're just giving a rounded idea about why and how fitting methods were born, what gave birth to them. And they started out when all hearing aids were linear. And they had to begin somewhere. They didn't have real ear. Okay, real ear didn't come out until the late 1980s, 1988. Liebharger was, around 1950s, 1960s. Okay, this was way before. So what they did was they used something called functional gain. And functional gain is the picture that I showed you earlier. So we'll look at it again. Functional gain is this. You measured the guy's thresholds under headphones and you got this loss. Then you did the left ear and you got a similar loss. Then you took out the headphones and you put the hearing aid in his ear and you retested his thresholds. Now remember, when you're doing this, the sound coming out of the warble tones coming from the speakers is really soft, right? Because you're trying to test the guy's thresholds. So you're presenting the softest tones possible. And if you can increase his thresholds by half, now really look at this, if I can raise so that his aided thresholds are lifted halfway above, then this would happen. Okay? And they couldn't see this. All they could have was the faith, the hope, and the love to make sure that this would happen. But they couldn't see it. They just had to have a rule, a fitting method that said, okay, logically, if we provide this kind of gain for average speech inputs, my aided average speech output will sit nicely in the listener's dynamic range. Let's look at our notes here and see what they say. Liebharger, 1944, used trial and error. Lots of people with sensory neural loss. With full-on gain, people usually adjusted the hearing aid to about half of their hearing loss. For example, someone with 60 dB sensory neural loss actually wants 30 dB of gain for average inputs. I would write down over here 30 dB of gain for average speech inputs. Okay, very important. Da 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 da. Underline. Da da da. Italics. Bold-faced. Okay, good. And then they would add another 10 to 15 dB of reserve gain. So what do I mean by that? You'd want this to occur at about a 2/3 volume. Remember the old days, the beige bananas? Here, I'll show you one here. There you go. Pull out an old hearing aid. There you go. So look at this old puck of a hearing aid. Look at it, it's got a volume control on the back. This is old. People don't do this crap much anymore. Now but remember, I'm giving you the history. Volume wheel could sit at number 1. And it's hard to see that, or number 4, okay? You would want to provide half gain at around 2/3 volume. Around a half to 2/3. That means you could still go up a third if you wanted to. You could make sounds louder if you wanted to. They call that reserve gain. So maybe someone was whispering, and the guy would want more than half gain. It would give him the ability to do that. So what was the goal? You chose the hearing aid that would provide half gain for average speech inputs, and if you cranked up the volume full blast, it gave an extra 10 to 15 dB on top of that half gain. That's what we call reserve gain. Good? Good. So now let's look at our writing. Where are we in our notes? Someone with 60 dB loss actually wants 30 dB of gain for average speech inputs. Add 10 to 15 reserve gain. So the client gets half gain at around 2/3 volume. Total full-on gain for that loss would probably be about 40 to 45. Do you see that? So someone with a 60 dB sensorineural loss, you want 30 dB of gain for average speech inputs, plus an additional 10 to 15 reserve gain if the guy wants. So the hearing aid you chose would provide a full-on gain of about 40 to 45 for this person. Okay? So how were analog hearing aids chosen for any particular loss? Half gain for these frequencies, plus about 10 to 15 reserve. And notice there's always a little bit less than half gain for low frequencies. Look at this. See how this letter A isn't halfway above? Look at right on the left. This one's not exactly halfway. You know why they did that? To reduce the upward spread of masking. To reduce the upward, so you'd give low frequencies a little bit less than half gain anyway, because lows mask highs better than highs mask lows. But in general, for mid to highs, half gain for average speech inputs. Good, we're getting places here. Now, UCL is measured in dBHL, right? And hearing aids are measured in dBSPL. And the average difference between HL and SPL for the speech frequencies is around 10 to 15. Therefore, the maximum power output, how did they choose that? Well, if your UCL, if your loudness tolerance level for speech was, say, 100 dBHL, they would give you the maximum power output of around 110 to 115. Because the difference between HL and SPL for speech frequencies is around 10 to 15. Okay, so that's how they did it. That's where this comes from. And that's how largely it still is done today, only it's all computerized. But I want you to really have a good grounding in hearing aid fitting methods. Next week, we're going to go over 4 children of the half gain rule. The Berger method, the Pogo method, the Now method, and the Libby method. And we'll talk about how they differed from each other. The week afterwards, we're going to go into today's fitting methods. Now NL1, Now NL2, DSL, DSL5. How did they compare to each other? And that will bring us to 2019. Okay? So that you have a good grasp on the fitting methods used today, and we can talk real ear. Okay, because real ear is using the fitting methods, and it's plotting the fitting methods, and you're da-da-da-da-da-da, you're doing, but I want you to understand too, yesterday's real ear looked at gain. Today's real ear couldn't give a crap about gain. Today's real ear, it's all about output. Think about it. If I ask you, can you go to the store and get some bread? And you go, sure. What do I care about? The bread. I don't care if you rode your bike there, if you walked there, if you drove there, if you took the train there. Who gives a crap? Did you get the bread? Okay? Output is the groceries that are delivered to the doorstep of your eardrum. Gain is just how you did it. Gain is a means to an end. Gain is kind of like, well, whatever. It's the output that rules. So people used to focus on half gain, half gain, half gain. Yeah, that makes sense. But today, we look at output. I'll show you just on a picture here. Go right here. I just want you to see where we're going in all this. And I'll go to my PowerPoint and go to the very first slide. Here you go. On the left was functional gain. That's how they verified a fitting. In the middle is old real ear, target gain, Real ear insertion gain. Did you get what you wanted? They put the tube in the ear canal. Get this, they put the tube in the ear canal and they measured the resonance of your open ear canal. Then they carefully held that tube in place, took the hearing aid, put it into the ear on top of that tube and measured what's going on then. So the difference between aided and unaided ear canal response was your insertion gain. Let me see. Here you go. Look at the picture here. The yellow. They put a tube in the guy's ear canal and with 50 dB sound measured his ear canal resonance. Oh, there's his peak at 2700 hertz. Oh, isn't that special? Look at that. Oh, great. Look at his outer ear canal resonance. Cool. Then they take the hearing aid, put it on top of the tube, and have the same sound coming in, and now you get real ear aided response. Real ear unaided response, real ear aided response, the difference between the two, real ear insertion gain. And did you match your target? Were you getting half gain? Today, we fart in that general direction. Today we do the right. Here's the loss. It's plotted now right side up in dB SPL. 0 is on the bottom, 120 is at the top. So normal hearing is a curve because you're looking at SPL. Everything is in SPL. Here's the guy's hearing loss. Here's the guy's loudness discomfort levels, the asterisks. So you can see his dynamic range is bigger in the lows and gets narrower in the highs. And look at your 3 targets. One target for average inputs, one target for soft inputs, another target for loud inputs. This is what we do today. So functional gain, 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. Insertion gain, 1990s up to 2010. In situ output from 2010 to 2019. Okay, so this is real ear verification and how we did it. So where are we moving here? Let's see. You got this? Okay, Carhart, 1946. Raymond Carhart. Carhart's notch, otosclerosis, the father of audiology. How did he prescribe hearing aids? He tried several hearing aids on the same person to see which one was the best for speech recognition. So this was way back. I mean, they weren't even trying to shape the frequency response of the hearing aid at all. And also which one the person liked the best. That must be because all hearing aids were body aids way back. No prescription targets per se. Largely relies on the individual skill of the clinician, but hard to transmit or convey fitting method from clinic to clinic. The comparison method. You chose 3 hearing aids and you said which one did the best for speech discrimination and also which one did the guy like the best. Comparison method. Then came Lybarger, half gain rule. Linear hearing aids were the state of the art. They gave the same gain for all inputs. You can't mirror the audiogram with full linear gain because you'll get too much output at high inputs. He found people preferred half gain. He used trial and error with sensory neural loss. And the half gain rule is still in use. It's the spinal cord of today's fitting methods. And here's the kicker. Look at the bottom line. That's the best one. No method has been proven to be the best. So that's why I say, just like we talk in religion, has anybody proved that Catholicism is better than Protestantism? Can't do that. Can you prove that there's a God? Well, no, it's not really like that. It's what you think, your faith. You can't prove that something is. It's the same with fitting methods. They're coming out of one's belief as to how to approach something. They're based on the half gain rule, but they're all wrinkles. This fitting method takes the half gain rule and does this to it. This one takes the half gain rule and does that to it. They tweak it. They're all based on the half gain rule, but they tweak it differently. And the way they tweak it is based on their belief. It's their approach. Why? Because the retina in the ear itself is damaged. And so fitting hearing aids is a little bit more loosey-goosey and a little bit more dependent on where the clinician comes from, what he or she thinks is the most important thing to do. So next week, we will look at the 4 children of Lybarger's half-gain rule: Berger, Pogo, Libby, and Nall. And we'll compare the targets. For, say, a sloping loss, we'll look at how the Nall targets differed from the Pogo targets for the same loss, than the Libby for the same loss. And you'll see variations. They're all based on half-gain rule, but they're all variations. Now, I'll stop here and ask you, is this what you learned in 150? Sorta, kinda. Good. Review is good. Okay? Next week, we're going to cement down the differences among those 4 fitting methods, and then the week after, we're going to look at today's fitting methods and how they evolved from yesterday's and what we do there. Isn't that special? By the time we get done the fitting methods, you'll be ready for a midterm. It'll be early March. It'll probably be the first week of March. And then after the midterm, we delve straight into real ear and how it uses the fitting methods, how the old real ear used fitting methods and how today's real ear uses fitting methods. And then you'll be up to snuff. You'll be looking at the hearing aid software and you'll get it. It's kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I had that, done that, seen that, got the t-shirt. All right. Cool. Glad you came by. Hey, look, I got a new map in the back there now. It's no longer South America. Now it's Europe. I told you I got those. I tell you where I got those from.
Yes, that's so fantastic.
Gotta like it. Okay, you guys. Catch you later. Live long and prosper. I'll stop recording now and shut off. Good. Glad you joined. And yes, I got to send out that email with the new link.
Yep.
The new link, the missing link. All right. Catch